Haki comes in many different forms. There's the looking one, the punching one, and the I will dominate the entire universe and the universe's mother one. But that's not quite it. Because there is a mysterious fourth Haki-based force out there in this world, one that we've all seen but never properly identified until now. Hello and welcome to the Grand Line Review, your source for everything One Piece. My name is Liam and I was probably being just a little bit over dramatic in that intro. I'm sure this has been discussed somewhere before, but not here, not by me, and not to you by me. Haki, it's a thing. And while we've spent most of post-time skip One Piece exploring the tenets of observation, armament, and conquerors, there is a fourth mysterious force out there. Something that as of right now, we only know as the voice of all things. A very intriguing innate ability that seems to borrow aspects from each previous Haki brand to result in a fun way to talk to objects, animals, and even objectimals, which are strange object-animal hybrids, of which One Piece does have several. But why do I think the voice of all things is Haki related? Well, reasons. Reasons that I will explain after revealing that our subscribers of the day are Riley Cunningham, Boy Chap, and FBI, which, wow, the entire FBI apparently, who all did an amazing thing, which was listen to the voice of all things telling them to press the subscribe button for the Grand Line Review, which, by the way, doing so will result in consistent injections of One Piece culture administered directly into your YouTube feed. So if you want to be our next subscriber of the day, then hit that button and please do say hi in the comments below if you are a new member of the Grand Fleet. Welcome. Now, what is the voice of all things? Well, it's a very vaguely defined ability to access a form of divine communication, and this is far more OP than it initially sounds because communication is the key to many things, be it a successful relationship, maintaining a supply chain, or adventuring alongside your fellow fictional pirates. Because the more good you can convey a message, the more gooder it is for your overall endeavor. But the major emphasis on the voice of all things has to do with listening, because it allows the user to hear the words or the intent of the entire world around them. Both living and non-living, you can hear their story. And sometimes those stories can be quite juicy and lead us to hidden discoveries such as wonderful poneglyphs. In fact, this is how infamous Playboy pirate King Goldie Roger found almost all of the sneaky stones, and on one occasion he even stated, "It was easy to find this stone. It's packed full of strong voices." It's a story of great power, isn't it? Which, interestingly enough, means that we need to adjust our criteria for becoming the Pirate King. In order to become what Roger was, you need wealth, fame, power, and highly tuned active listening skills. Of course, Roger was also able to hear the voices of living things that were unable to communicate via human speak, such as the Sea Kings, but the voice of all things also works the other way around. Instead of doing the listening to the talking, you can also do the talking to the listening. An example of which would be Momonosuke commanding Zunisha to engage in elephant-based combat with Jack in what I would describe as a Mobius strip battle because it was completely one-sided. But this ability is even rarer than Conqueror's Haki. So much so that there's currently only 4.5 characters in the series who possess it. As stated already, the most prolific of which was Goldie Roger, who has displayed the greatest mastery of the power thus far. Kozuki Momonosuke is also a confirmed voice user, as is the owner of the testicles from which Momonosuke spawned, Kozuki Odin. Then of course we have our protagonist, Monkey D. Luffy, who may very well be credited with the first displayed use of this ability in the series, because as early as chapter 13, Luffy was seen conversing with Choo Choo, who said, "Ruff, ruff, ruff, ruff." Or I don't know, however you pronounce his dog language, which I'm assuming is either Doglish, Doganese, or perhaps even Dogwegian. In any case, Luffy heard Choo Choo's message loud and clear, and he replied, "Thanks, good luck to you too, dog." Thus very potentially becoming the first voice of all things user in the series, even if it may have been, yes, an unintentional addition at the time. And as for our half character, that would be Charlotte Pudding, a member of the Three-Eyed People who can allegedly awaken the ability to hear the voice of all things. Although because Pudding in particular is only a half-blood member of the species, this may never be a possibility for her. Things do get quite tricky now because the voice of all things does seem to have undergone some changes over the course of One Piece. The first time it was referred to with such a title was by Rayleigh in chapter 507. Another thing, Roger didn't actually decipher those ancient writings. We are pirates. There is no way our intellects could match the prodigal Professor Clover or the scholars of O'Hara. He was able to hear, he being Roger actually I should add, he was able to hear the voices of all things in this world. That's all. Which would heavily imply that while Roger was not able to read the poneglyph writing, he was still able to somehow decipher the message imbued in them. And this idea was emphasized by a large maternal figure in chapter 853. I'm not going to screw up like I did with Roger. He used that strange ability to hear the voice of all things and read the stone, which is a much more literal explanation of the power, you know, he did the thing and he read my stuff. But that puts us in a bit of a weird area, because if that is how the voice of all things worked, then Roger never would have needed his fellow active listener Kozuki Oden to read the poneglyphs for him, because then the ability would need to be renamed as the voice of the vast majority, but not all things, not these things in particular. And so we have a bit of a sneaky retcon. During Oden's flashback, Roger stated that he had stolen a poneglyph rubbing from Big Mom, and Roger's abilities were clearly nerfed so that he could still hear the voice of poneglyphs, but he was not capable of understanding what they were specifically saying. I guess think of it as having a neighbor who yells in a foreign language. Yes, you can hear the sound and you do understand the emotional intent behind it, but you have no idea what the crap he's yelling about. All you know is that you want him to stop immediately because you're sitting in your office desperately trying to record a video about fictional pirates in between his outbursts of indecipherable rage. We've all been there. But what does any of this have to do with Haki? Well, firstly, because it's the straightforward, logical conclusion. Because even in a series about a goofy rubber boy fighting against clowns, sandcastles, and biscuit men, well, even that series is governed by some form of loose logic. And in this case, you can pretty much boil every weird thing that happens in One Piece down to one of three causes: devil fruits, Haki, or realist painting. Generally, more of the first two, but Miss Golden Week certainly was something special, being neither a fruit nor a Haki user. She was just a very talented artist. But on this occasion, we're going to have to unfortunately discount realist painting and devil fruits, which just leaves us with Haki. And there is very solid grounding within this realm to examine, because the voice of all things initially does seem like a fairly simple escalation of observation Haki. In fact, it's fairly similar to an existing brand of observation, which is the power to sense the emotions of others. Otohime was capable of this, as well as Fujitora, and even Kobe awakened this ability at a very inopportune time, being gifted with the trauma of sensing the emotions of all of those being brutally slaughtered at the Battle of Marineford. The voice of all things isn't wildly different to that, it's just going a layer deeper and, well, assumedly with far less mental scarring. And instead of sensing the emotions of people, voice users become capable of sensing the emotion behind objects. Or perhaps emotion is a bad word, but the intent behind them. So in terms of poneglyphs, this may mean being able to sense the original intent regarding why each one of them was written. Hence why Roger can understand the vague meaning of them without being able to comprehend the specifics of the writing. But of all of the different types of Haki, observation is the most diverse. Different characters unlock different aspects of it. However, when it comes to the voice of all things, it appears that they share a key trait with Conqueror's Haki, being inheritance. Right now, it is heavily implied that the voice of all things is a genetic trait, one passed on from father to son in the case of Oden and Momonosuke, as well as one held by an entire race with the Three-Eyed Tribe. And of course, Luffy and Roger both wield massive Ds, so that can go on to explain their possession of it. But to date, no regular old dude guy has been shown to possess the voice of all things. And another point in favor of it being Haki based is that just like Haki, users of the voice of all things are capable of projecting it in order to speak. So it may very well be a combination of differing brands of Haki, if not an entirely new area altogether. Although interestingly, there are also characters who can use aspects of the voice of all things without necessarily having the ability. A prime example of this would be Shirahoshi, who through the wonders of Poseidon, possesses the ability to communicate with and even command sea kings. Although it's unknown and probably unlikely that Shirahoshi would be able to do this with non-sea life, let alone non-living things altogether. But we should also point out Zoro, as his classic Alabasta matchup with Dar's Bones is an event that only appreciates over time, because it has been confirmed during the Wano that the ability to cut steel was, wildly enough, a usage of advanced armament Haki. But in addition to that, Zoro had a realization that sounds mighty familiar in retrospect. The falling rocks. I could feel something alive in them. Not just a present, something more distinct, like breathing. The rocks breathing. Trees with heartbeats of their own. The earth itself breathing. Which, while not exact, does sound awfully similar to the voice of all things. The idea that Zoro can feel objects as if they were living things. He also has a tendency to talk to his swords as if they were living things as well, managing to assign them with all sorts of different personalities as if they were his children. However, it would be difficult to speculate on Zoro being a voice user because he was on Zo and there was no indication that he could hear Zunesha speaking. So Zoro speaking to his swords might just be an early sign of mental decline after being hit in the head one too many times, resulting in an effect similar to an old man speaking to his tin can collection. Or it may just be another one of the iterations of observation Haki, or even a combination of observation and armament, which mimics part of the voice-like effect. Although I suppose one of the biggest points against the voice of all things being Haki based is that it currently has no clear correlation to willpower. Because usually in One Piece, when you go rah, then the Haki, well, it also goes rah, and then the one with the most rah tends to win. Then again, sometimes incredibly potent Haki spawns in very unlikely places, like say Isa from Sky Island. To this day, this little girl thing is probably a better observation Haki user than the vast majority of the characters in the series, and all Isa does for a living these days is sell balloons. So she really didn't need to invest a tremendous amount of willpower into her abilities whatsoever. Whatever the case, it's not out of the question, considering what we know about Haki, for a handful of people to simply be born with the voice of all things variation. In fact, that's exactly the case we need to accept whether it was Haki or not, actually. At the moment, it just feels odd for it to be an entirely separate power, given how well a lot of it fits into the established Haki system. But then again, it could be, because who am I to say otherwise? So I'm going to give the final say to the collective wisdom of the Grand Fleet, and whilst it was actually an incredibly close poll, a slim majority of you do feel like the voice of all things is in some way connected to Haki. Except for Artie Pickles, who abstained from voting and simply said the following: Haki my Saki, or Haki my Saki, or maybe a combination of both. Something to do with ball sack. I don't know what that means, but I probably won't be doing it. Instead, what we will be doing is another video, watching it to be precise, like this one. It's about One Piece and such, because there's always so much more to learn, explore, and experience with this wonderful series. So I look forward to seeing you there.